Well, hello there, imagination connoisseurs, and welcome to another Road Trippin' with R&B podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bodden, and you're listening to our podcast recorded on Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. We're glad you're here today. As you know, Rob and I chat every weekday when he's on the road on his way to the studio to meet with John Campea and the rest of the Campea crew as they record their John Campea show and mailbag show and all the other stuff that's on YouTube and covering all the entertainment news that you need to know. Highly recommend that you watch that stuff. It's a lot of fun. And I recommend you listen to this podcast because while Rob's on the road, anything goes. And quite literally today, there were a couple moments where I think Rob got a little excited and knocked the phone to the floor of the car. So I've had to do a little extra editing to kind of take out the spots where I honestly thought Rob had put the car in the ditch once. So, you know, it's every day is a new adventure when you go on a road trip with Rob, and God love him. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And we have a good time today. Among the things we talk about today, the announcement that Joker 2 could very well be a musical with Lady Gaga in it. So, you guys, time's a wasting. We need to work up our best Batusi and get ready for a musical sequel to the Joker. It should be fun. There are a lot of people already hating on it that don't know anything about the film, and that's what Rob and I talk about. We talk about how it's unfortunate, really, how many fans and fellow fans, folks that we agree with, folks that we disagree with, seem to have an unwillingness to look at completely new things and accept that they may be creative, may be acceptable, in fact, may even be something that we like at some point. But how do we bridge that? How do we get over that? We'll talk about that a little bit, but we'll also answer some letters. I've been saying for the last couple podcasts, we have letters, Rob, and it's always too late for us to be able to answer them. We have some long-awaited letters that we answer in today's podcast as well. This podcast does have a little bonus extra length to it. It's over an hour long, about an hour and 10 minutes. I hope you enjoy it. I know we had a blast recording it, and it started, of course, when I pushed this button right here and made this sound.
Well, good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Rob. How's the drive today?
Just started. It seems clear. It seems nice. Mike, I have to tell you.
Yes.
Maybe it's just me, but there seems to be a lot less people on the road now.
Really?
And I think that's because of gas prices.
Yeah, well, $6 a gallon will do that.
Dude, I mean, you can't, even I'm lucky I have this hybrid, but, wow. I mean, filling up tanks it's literally cost prohibitive. If I didn't go to John's, I wouldn't be driving anywhere because now we're into it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month with the amount of time I drive, me and Elizabeth drive. So,
well, yet one more reason to consider moving to the Midwest, Rob. We're not quite at $4 a gallon here.
Yeah, well, that is a good thing.
Of course.
But then again, the studio I work at.
That's true. That'd be a hell of a drive every day.
So, Mike, I have to say I'm annoyed.
Why are you annoyed, Rob? What's wrong?
I'm annoyed with my own tribe. At least, people always talk about, they make fun of the fans. I am a fan. I'm an old school fan. So when I point my critical lens at my own tribe, I feel it's justified.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like yesterday, they announced that Joker 2 is a go. Todd Phillips' Joker 2 is a go with potentially Lady Gaga playing Harley Quinn. And they announced that it's going to be a musical. And my first knee-jerk response to that was, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Because I am a big fan of musicals, first of all. And there has been, over the last almost 50 years, a lot of really crazy, cutting-edge musicals that have been culturally relevant and great. Well, like the South Park guys making Book of Mormon, or Darren Bousman making Repo the Genetic Opera, John Cameron Mitchell's Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Or you can go back, Brian De Palma doing Phantom of the Paradise, or the Japanese film, The Happiness of the Katakuris, or however you pronounce that word. I mean, or my favorite, the recent Polish mermaid horror musical, The Lure, and you hire like how would you classify Lady Gaga, Mike?
Well, I got to tell you, it's like I know, I've got friends that went to Juilliard, which is the school that Lady Gaga went to and graduated from. My daughter, who is an opera singer and a studio musician, holds Lady Gaga like in a very special place as a very special talent. And I think if you were looking at doing a superhero musical with the Joker and you needed a female lead to play, who else but it's got to be Harley Quinn, right? You could do a lot worse than a Juilliard-trained opera singer with an incredible range and an ability to take any piece of music she sings and turns it into solid gold. You could do a lot worse than that. I think it's brilliant.
Plus, the working title of the movie was Joker Fwiw.
Mm-hmm.
Fwiw, the French term meaning like collective madness.
Right.
And what a great title. I'm like, if it's a musical, that should be the title of the movie. And presumably, a lot of people filled up my Twitter feed. Rob, this is a terrible take. Why would you like this? And I even threw it out there to like one guy. I'm like, well, he's like, I hate musicals. I'm like, what musicals have you seen? Well, I watched a lot of classic Disney cartoons and I tapped out. I'm like,
well, first off, I gotta tell you, I got a question about that anyway. What's wrong with a frickin' Disney musical? I mean, they're enjoyable. It's like, it's not sophisticated, sure, but it's for the masses. There's a lot of musicals that aren't necessarily super sophisticated, but completely enjoyable. It's just more traditional. And I think you take a look at Todd Phillips, you're not going to get a traditional anything out of him. I think.
I mean, Todd Phillips has he made a movie about Gigi Allen and the Murder Junkies. One of the most notorious punk rock bands ever, where Gigi Allen was defecating on stage and throwing it at his audience. So I would say if Todd Phillips is going to make a musical, it's not going to be like any musical you've ever seen.
Exactly.
And to me, if somebody wants to take those kinds of creative swings, that's the world I want to live in. I mean, I've seen enough traditional Batman movies, whether it's animation or Batman comics or the movies that we've been getting since 1989. Like, who cares? Well, even Matt Reeves knew the Batman. I really, really liked it. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
But it's still Batman. I'm like, I get it. There's only so many things so many stories you can tell in the form. So what you have to do is change the form.
Right.
And a Joker musical, can you imagine? Like every time like a scene would happen between Harley and the Joker in their own minds, they're so insane together that they create these giant, elaborate Busby Berkeley 1930s musical numbers. It could be insane. It could be insane. Plus, the music could be great.
Well, am I reading this right? Phillips also produced A Star Is Born with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like he doesn't know how to incorporate music into his storytelling, right? And I got to tell you, I'm with you, Rob. I get really sick and tired of hearing fans complaining about an idea when all they really have to go on is maybe a couple of key cast members and a title to work off of and a really super broad concept, and they start getting really critical and pine for that project to be taken or drawn from some current existing piece of IP. And then when it's finally produced and in the theater and maybe actually does draw on that original story or this original comic series or whatever it was, then they bitch about it not being as good as the original. It's like, I'm all for original storytelling. And if this is a way to get some originality into a Joker story that's not going to be like an homage to Heath Ledger or a replay of Jack Nicholson or my favorite Joker, Cesar Romero. Who by the way, Cesar Romero would have been awesome in a Joker musical. I'm just telling you, because that man had the chops and the hoofs to be able to do it. But that's another story for another day. But yeah, no, I think
what I don't like is that somebody who's never seen musicals doesn't know anything about musicals
Right.
immediately dismisses the idea of doing a Joker musical because they don't like musicals that they've never actually seen anyway. So their
Exactly.
opinion of not liking musicals is not even an opinion because they've never seen musicals to dislike.
Exactly. I have no idea what it is, but I know I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm all about, like, if you think about there are certain comic runs, Joker comic runs, like off the top of my head, I think about Mad Love or something, that would lend themselves quite well to doing musicals.
Well,
And, you know, when
you're
you think
exactly
about
right.
musical numbers in Team America World Police,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's a montage, you know, that people forget that there are musical numbers in things that have become part of the zeitgeist that people like, you know, the songs themselves. You know, Uncle Fucker, for instance. I mean, South Park is a great example.
Absolutely.
And
What-
Matt Stone and Trey Parker especially, they love musicals.
one of my favorite music.
Cannibal the musical.
That's right. One of my favorite musical numbers of all times is the musical interlude in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they think about going to Camelot, and then they do that extraordinarily silly song, and at the end, King Arthur says, "We shall not go to Camelot. It is a silly place," and it's fabulous, you know.
Monty Python, another example of what meaning of life always
look on the bright
side, or is that Life of Brian?
That's Life of Brian, yeah. That's right.
I mean, it's so funny because that musicals and absurdity, that's why I think the idea of doing a Joker musical is a perfect idea.
Well,
like, it's not.
You're exactly
right. It's not even that off the wall.
Well, but you're exactly right. You know, the thing about the character of the Joker that makes it work potentially so well in a musical form is that musicals, if you think about them in practice, they're completely ridiculous. It's like, in order to keep the story going forward, we're going to do this musical interlude. It needs to continue driving the story forward, but it needs to be, it's a ridiculous thing that happens in the middle of a dramatic, you know, series of events. We all break into song. I mean, who's the one villain in Batman's Rogues Gallery where that would make perfect sense? And it is in the over-the-top, wildly, almost insanely crazy Joker. And with Harley Quinn, I mean, I'm all in on this. I think it'll be tremendous. I'm looking forward to seeing this now.
Oh, I mean, dude, Jack Nicholson dancing around a museum and defacing it while Prince's Party Man played on the soundtrack. I mean, come on. We've already seen examples of what it could be.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, it's funny, between that and then somebody responding to one of these conversations and saying that they're a toxic Rob Burnett fan, that they don't like me because I've appeared with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, or I've appeared, you know, on Midnight's Edge, or I've done this without any mention of the fact that I've been working for 4 years with John Campia, and that I've had all manner of people on my own show.
Right.
And I support positivity or whatever. It's so interesting. Criticism is not toxicity.
No.
There's you know, and it's funny because I was watching, you know, everybody now comes after me because, like, I'm friends with Gary Beekler.
Right.
Now, Gary Beekler and I have very different approaches to things, but I'm actually a fan of Gary's because when he goes after things, like, he goes hard after the new Amazon Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings series, because he's such a Tolkien fan, and he did a video the other day that I watched. It was really good. I mean, he knows his lore so well that when he's complaining about things, it's backed up with evidence. Now, he's an ex-punk rocker, an ex-felon, you know, an ex-con, and his attitude is born out of who he is. And there's an honesty to him that people are like, oh, he's just trading on clicks. Well, you know what? That's his brand. He can do it. His style's different than my style, but at least when you watch a Lord of the Rings video that he puts up, he has a lot of compelling arguments, and he backs up with quotes from the showrunners and things, and they are subverting Tolkien's lore to make the show that they want to make today to service their own agenda. which I think is the absolute wrong way to approach things.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, I do not trade on any kind of toxicity. And because I hate modern Star Trek so much, but even I'm willing to say, oh, I like this or I like that. I mean, to me, I've been Elizabeth's watching the first season of From the Earth to the Moon. I mean, pardon me, not From the Earth to the Moon. For All Mankind, she hadn't watched it.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep going in and watching the first season with her. It's so good.
Right.
Like
right.
last night was the episode where the Saturn V for, I think, Apollo 25 explodes. And it kills Gene Kranz and 11 other people. And then Margot has to go see the disgraced Werner von Braun again. And they have this conversation because basically Werner von Braun raised her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching this and I'm like, this is so much better than anything that Star Trek has put on in the last 5 years.
Right.
And just this one episode where Werner von Braun, and of course the audience is like, well, who's Werner von Braun? What difference does it make? And why is it, so Margot's dad worked on the Manhattan Project, and after the bomb went off, he couldn't be a good father to her. I don't get it. It's just like, I really do feel a lot of people's critical acumen has dropped because their level of general education is not broad the way it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a failing of our school system.
Well, I don't think you have to look much farther than the number of conspiracy theories that prevail right now and the way that it's manipulated our news, in addition to kind of the general misunderstandings that occurred with the way the pandemic was handled and the number of these other things where basic science concepts, basic math concepts, seem to be missing from people. I mean, they just don't quite understand it. There are a lot of people who don't understand how governments operate and what authorities governments have, and the difference between what governments can do, whether it's a city government or a county government or a state government or the federal government, and what private enterprise can do, and the places where there's any kind of overlap. These are all basic things that we should be learning, in school, but there's a lot of stuff that people need to learn in school, and there's a lot of things that we want kids to be able to experience, and some of that is driven, I think, unfortunately, by a lot of parents who want to be able to live vicariously through their kids. So they want to involved in football or in some of these other activities that may not necessarily be programs that originally were built to teach teamwork and cooperation and working together, but now it's really all about winning. And the whole mindset that you see prevail then comes down to kind of a mindset of winners and losers, and everything becomes a zero-sum game. And then that's what we take back and use when we try to do evaluations of political arguments or proposals or new scientific theories or any of these other things. Everything's got to be one way or the other. There's no shades of gray. There can't be any ambiguity. Everything needs to be either win or lose, on or off. That's a problem. You start to lack nuance, and as soon as you start missing nuance on things, then so many of the things that make art especially great and intriguing and engaging and interesting are out the window, because your audience isn't even looking for it anymore. They don't even know to look for it, and that's disappointing.
Right.
So.
No, it is. But on that note, Mike, we have letters.
We do have letters, and I'm glad that we're going to get to them, because we've had some very patient imagination connoisseurs who have sent us in letters. A couple of them have sent in more than one letter, and we're going to go ahead and do these. So we'll go through these fairly quickly, but we will be posting extras up on the podcast for each letter, and I'll be embedding those into website posts as well. But this first one is a letter from our friend Omar, who writes in about a movie anniversary that just recently passed us this weekend. So, hi, Rob and Mike. Since we don't really get Robservations episodes on Saturdays anymore, I thought I'd bring this up here. Another movie anniversary came upon us on June 11th, 2022. It marked the 40th anniversary of Steven Spielberg's movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which came out on June 11th, 1982. Following the massive critical and commercial success Spielberg received from the previous year's biggest hit, Raiders of the Lost Ark, he triumphed again with E.T. The movie was another major critical and commercial success, surpassing the original Star Wars to become the then highest-grossing movie of all time. It was a title that it held on to for 11 years until another Spielberg film, Jurassic Park, took over the title, and then it was eventually trumped by James Cameron's Titanic and then Avatar. So the film, E.T., won 4 Oscars: Best Visual Effects, Best Original Score, Best Sound Editing, and he has Best Sound Editing in there twice. I'm not sure. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, Best Cinematography, and Best Film Editing. The film also impacted pop culture with the iconic shot of the bicycle flying across the moon, which became the logo for Spielberg's production company Amblin, being parodied and imitated many times, and the line of dialogue, "E.T. phone home." And I might add the amazing level of interest generated for Reese's Pieces, but that's just me. So to think it might not have been made, as Spielberg pitched it originally to Columbia Pictures, who rejected it, so he approached Sid Sheinberg, who got it made at Universal. All in all, it's amazing how the film still holds up and holds a special place in film history. Thanks. Live long and prosper. Omar. Rob, what do you remember about E.T.?
Dude, I saw it a week before it opened at a special advanced screening because it was very secret. You know, they wouldn't let anybody know what it was about. And like the poster for the advanced one sheet, the key art was just lights in a cloudy sky. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, it was one of those movie-going experiences I'll never forget because it was truly magical sitting in that theater. And the theater was indeed packed. Now, it came out, the sneak, I want to say the sneak was a week in advance, so I think I saw it the same weekend that Poltergeist and Star Trek 2 opened.
Right.
I'd have to go back and look. But Spielberg also produced Poltergeist, and that came from Amblin. So basically, Poltergeist was, and I always thought that Poltergeist and E.T. took place in the same tract home community up in California, and it was just one end of the same big neighborhood, opposite ends. But no, I mean E.T. was a magical film. Everything that I mean, it's funny when I read accounts. People write these accounts that weren't alive. You know, these movies came out,
right?
And it was a big, giant summer of 1982. Mm-hmm. And within a 3-month period of time, you had everything from Conan to Cat People to Rocky III to Star Trek to The Road Warrior, Star Trek to The Wrath of Khan to Poltergeist to Blade Runner. I mean, Blade Runner and John Carpenter's The Thing opened on the same day in July.
Wow.
Or in June.
Yeah.
And then we had Megaforce and Tron. I mean, it was the summer of '82 was incredible.
Right.
And E.T. was a big part of that. I mean, that was the juggernaut of the summer. I mean, I think I probably saw the movie 4 times. You know, it's the ultimate wish fulfillment. You're 12 years old. A lot of it was about the subtext about a divorced family and no father, and Elliot finds E.T. Who doesn't want to find an alien when you're 12?
Exactly. Someone who actually understood him. You know.
No, it's funny because I've watched the movie. It's an incredible movie, but because it has such emotion and such sentimentality, and it does have a truly innocent sense of wonder.
Right.
There's a lot of people I've noticed over especially the last couple of decades, that sort of reject E.T., which I find it's so interesting because we live in our cynical social media. Let's not take things seriously. Let's not deal with true sentimentality. So it's certainly not. E.T. is not a hard-edged film, but clearly it's one of the great first contact films ever made, and one of the greatest family films ever made.
Yeah, it's truly a beautiful, and you know, I don't refer to many films as being beautiful, but it's a beautifully crafted film, and it's just a beautiful story, and it really, the sentimentality is authentic. It's not overly sweet, you know, and a lot of people don't realize, Yoda makes a special sneak appearance in this movie. There's a kid during the Halloween trick-or-treating, there's a kid dressed up as Yoda. And apparently, Spielberg put that in there as an Easter egg specifically for George Lucas, and John Williams rewrote the musical score just a little bit to throw Yoda's theme in there when Yoda's on screen.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. But
and a lot of the action figures, and it takes place in a world where Star Wars exists as a movie.
Right,
I love.
right. Well, and which is part of what made it feel so authentic. One other big Star Wars Easter egg that's in it, apparently, is that Harrison Ford is in this movie, but you never see his face. You only see his legs because he is the government official at the beginning walking through the site or whatever.
No, he's the high school principal.
Oh, is he the high school? Okay, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. See, I knew that you would know, Rob. So that's good. But it's great. It's a worthy anniversary to celebrate. And Omar, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. We appreciate that. Hey, next letter. This one is from Pasty Coppertop. Our friend Kevin writes in again. The subject for this is actors or writers. Who's more important? Mike and Rob, Kenobi. That's the title, right? Enough said. Okay, I have a question I want to pose to you guys. There has been much debate about the actors and the writing in this show and many other shows in recent history. There has been much backlash when they get called out for it. It seems that there are double standards at play here, and I don't mean the way you may think. Moses Ingram, by many, has been called out by many as not being great in her role as Reva. That can be debated by people smarter than me when it comes to evaluating actors. What I don't understand is when many also defend her by saying the writing is letting her down. So in the projects she was good in, the writing must have been great, right? Why does it seem the actors many times get a pass when the acting is not great and the blame is shouldered onto the writers? It seems that it doesn't work the other way around when the writing is awesome and the acting is not good. Why is that? Why do writers get much of the blame and not a lot of praise? Actors seem to get a lot of praise and not a lot of blame. And for the record, I think neither has been great in this show. So I ask, what is more important besides the obvious answer of both, the acting or the writing? As always, keep up the good work. And Rob, don't forget the Energon for the car. Kevin. So there you go. So I don't know.
I mean, he answered his own question. It's a combination of both. Obviously, an actor can only do with the material what the material gives them to work with. So if the writing is bad, or the writing is substandard, or doesn't serve, the actor can only do what they can do with it. Look, I believe that once you have cast something, once you've cast a movie, and I think it's important that you sit down and you really think about an actor's part. Mm-hmm. If you're the writer, I've done this only on one movie, but actually I've done it on two, but one of the movies didn't get produced. But you go back through the script and you're like, okay, I've cast this actor for a reason. Does our work as writers serve this actor? Can we do something to craft the material for the actor? Now, I know someone like Quentin Tarantino's words are sacrosanct. You don't change them. And I know in the theater you don't change them either. Mm-hmm. But in my experience with a low-budget movie, you can always, you see what the actor brings to the role. You can either allow them to improv, or you can tailor the script a little bit more to their strengths, or you can do a combination of both. Mm-hmm. But I do think that, look, everything begins on the printed page, and because that's your story. And the thing is, though, actors are really important too, because a bad actor can sink a great script.
Right.
But an actor cannot save a bad script. So I would say that in a way, the writer is more important than the actor. Well, because the actors, it's the material that gets the movie sold, it gets the movie financed. But then again, an actor does as well. But the thing is, you have to have the script first.
Right.
The actor is your penthouse suite of your modern building. But the building still needs a foundation, and it still needs the rest of the building before you could have a great penthouse.
Well, and I would, in fact, add 2 more players to this that can definitely affect the impression that a viewer gets about the performance on screen by the actor and the quality of the story as written by the writer. And those other 2 players are the director and the editor. Because
yes, but that wasn't part of the question.
No, I understand that, but there are plenty of times. Look, I just had this conversation with one of my kids. It's like, if you're getting an opportunity to audition, at this level, everybody who is auditioning, in theory anyway, everyone is good. Everyone's good enough, but what else can you bring to it in the audition and then, on set, to actually make your work preferred? And there's an awful lot that an actor, as a vessel for all of this collaboration, has to keep in mind. It's not nearly as easy as people think it is, I think. But you're right. It all does start with the quality of the story, and the quality of the story is very often shaped not just by the writers, but by the director, who looks at it and is trying to be able to understand how this thing is going to be completely visualized, and how he's going to get, or she's going to get, actors to do the business that's on the page. So.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, the directing is a big part of it, and actors need to be directed.
Right.
There are a lot of directors that aren't good with actors, and when you cast a movie properly, the actors, experienced actors, they know what they're doing.
Yes.
But a lot of actors you still have to craft the performance, and I think, what a lot of people object to that we're seeing in these roles, like, I think all 3, both Sun Kang and Moses Ingram, have not been directed well.
Right.
And Deborah Chow is not that experienced as a director, but a lot of people, I think, are dealing with the fantastical, science fiction, fantasy, and horror.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that don't quite understand. They think you can go much broader with these things because they're not real. And I would say the exact opposite is true.
Right.
You can go broad or not broad, but you really need to create a reality with your broadly drawn sci-fi fantasy characters.
Yes.
You have to make those characters believable in the universe that you've created. And I always tell people, you've got to go back to the original Star Wars. To me, that's the only text that matters in terms of the universe. And if you look at it, Star Wars is actually a very understated movie in terms of the characters. There's not big performances like this. I mean, even Peter Cushing to Tarkin.
Right.
When he comes on, he's like, Princess Leia, you don't know how hard I found it signing the order to terminate your life. He's not going, Princess Leia.
No, there are only 2 parts.
How hard I found it signing the order to terminate your life.
But Rob,
he's not doing Brian Blessed as Prince Fulton.
No, but that's true. But there are 2 little bits in the original Star Wars movie where it gets a little unhinged, and one is when Leia responds back and tells Tarkin that she should have recognized his stench when she came. Okay, so all of a sudden she's got an accent.
But that in that moment.
Oh God, that's cornball city.
But she's insulting him as much as she can in the moment, and you could say that, and she doesn't. She says, "Governor Tarkin, I recognize foul scent was brought on board."
Yeah,
and then Tarkin grabs her chin and says, "Charming to the last." It might be corny, but it's still awesome, and it's not theatrical.
But the other,
it's not these big sweeping theatrics.
The other piece, though, is when in the dogfight over the Death Star, and Luke says, "I'm going in," and they do that spinning shot of him in the that makes me my skin crawl every time I see that. That's just bad.
No, I mean, I would disagree with you in that moment, but I mean, I understand where you're coming from. But the point is, one thing, a lot of people are talking about, look, I don't think Moses Ingram has been well directed in terms of crafting her character.
Mm-hmm.
She's too contemporary in her delivery.
Right.
And I don't think she's having as much. She doesn't talk like she's a Star Wars inquisitor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to decide. And Sun Kang, I don't know what Sun Kang is doing. He's way too over the top.
Mm-hmm.
There's the difference between both of them need more Peter Cushing in their performance.
Right. Right.
And I think again, it's up to a director. A lot of directors who don't want to work with actors, but it's like, look, man, Star Wars is very specific. And I think the biggest problem with the prequel trilogy is George Lucas famously doesn't like to direct actors. And none of the characters in the prequel trilogy feel like they're at all the same movie. Everyone's delivering a different performance.
Mm-hmm.
And even Sam Jackson is not good as Mace Windu.
Yeah.
And I really think in a Star Wars movie, more than any other kind of a movie, you have to be able to deliver these kinds of performances. And it's funny because I really think that the reason, again, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back are your templates for what makes great Star Wars. By the time you got to Return of the Jedi, George Lucas's influence, I mean, the great thing about the original Star Wars is you had Gary Kurtz producing, you had Marshall Lucas. Basically, you had adults. Mm-hmm. And George Lucas is an introverted geek who's a car fan, and he was an idea guy. That's why he made THX 1138, and American Graffiti will always be his best, most personal movie because it was his life.
Right.
So it feels genuine.
It's very authentic.
But when George Lucas is called upon to dig deep into the pathos of human behavior, he doesn't know anything about that. Right. So that's why when you get to Jedi and then the prequel trilogy, I know Richard Marquand directed Jedi, but George Lucas was over his shoulder the whole time, and everything in Jedi is goofy. Like, even our main characters are goofy. And it's like you're suddenly watching a kid's movie. That's one of the reasons I was not a big fan of Jedi. I'm like, who are these people?
Come on. You didn't like the droids being upside down in the sand dune, getting pulled out by a giant magnet?
A horrible painted backdrop because they shot that on a studio. I mean, it's just, I mean, you look at that stuff and look, I understand that fans, by saying anything bad about Star Wars movies, you wade into this thing, but it's hard to explain to people the difference between Star Wars Empire and then Jedi. Right. Even when, we used to watch it at my friend Steve Melching's house, who worked on Clone Wars, the animated series. We used to watch every New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, we'd watch Star Wars Empire and Jedi. We'd watch the trilogy, a bunch of us. And it got to the point where Jedi is so painfully below Star Wars and Empire when you watch them all together. That's not necessarily as true now with the special editions, but the way we used to watch them, it was just painful when you got to Jedi because none of it works. No. I mean, the scenes are fine, but in terms of the verisimilitude and the performances, they're just all over the place, and it feels, everything about Jedi feels wrong, from the cinematography to the color timing. It's all very interesting how I think that Return of the Jedi is a complete misfire, even though, people love it. Right. And I understand why. But watching it at the time, I was 16 when Jedi came out, and it was to this day, the most disappointing movie I have ever seen.
Well, I've gone on record with my level of love for that movie, so I'm not going to beleaguer the point anymore. But I think I do think one of the things that was most satisfying about that film, whether it was well made or not, and you and I are pretty much in agreement on that issue, but I do think people like the fact that it kind of put a ribbon on the entire trilogy. It was a completed story, and
I mean, I do like the things I like in Jedi. I do like the swashbuckling rescue on Solo, and I really like the confrontation with the Emperor. But in Empire, I mean, at the end of Jedi. But you know what? People even forget about this. The Emperor, Clive Rebel's Emperor in Empire, before he was replaced with Ian McDiarmid, the Emperor in Empire Strikes Back was really, really scary.
Right.
Because he spoke like this. Vader's like, if he could be turned, he would be a valuable asset. And the Emperor's like, yes. He's always contemplative, and he's always thinking 10 moves ahead. When you get to Jedi and you meet Ian McDiarmid, he's the fucking witch from Snow White. You know, and he's like, the power of this fully armed and operational battle station. Ha ha ha.
Yes, Vader. Yeah.
He's exactly what I said they didn't do in Star Wars. He's this battle station will be fully operational when your friends arrive. I mean, it's just like, dude, I'm not scared of that guy. I mean, that guy is a cackling witch from an over-the-top animated movie.
You just want to throw a bucket of water on him and get it over with. Yeah. No.
Yes. And that was to me, that was a big problem. And now, look, you can't even. I can't even talk to people about Star Wars anymore. You can't have a conversation, especially with younger people. You can't have a conversation with them because there is absolutely no critical acumen directing Star Wars anymore. None.
Well, you know.
And I mean, it's either it sucks. I'm like, it doesn't suck. It's not all suckage. I mean, Book of Boba Fett is the closest I think things have come to really, really, really sucking.
Other than the holiday special.
And to me, Kenobi is a failure because the story they're telling is bad.
Right.
It's not a story. Inherently, it's not about Ben Kenobi. It's a story about the Star Wars universe.
Right.
And it should have been, like I've said, if you're going to make a Star Trek or Star Wars story, take the franchise out of your story.
Right.
Forget it all. Tell me a story about a character. Forget it's a Star Wars character. Tell me the story of that character and what he's going through or she's going through, and we can watch that. But as soon as you're like, hey, he's going to go rescue Princess Leia, I'm like, nope. You failed. You failed. Fail.
Exactly.
Don't care.
Exactly.
You've now proven to me that you do not have a story to tell about Kenobi and his life. You failed. Now, people will watch it because they want to watch. I want to see Ben Kenobi. But it's like, you failed. And to me, what we're watching now is once your story has failed, you can bring Inquisitors in, you can do all this other crap. Your story is already compromised.
Right.
So it really doesn't matter. And how are you supposed to... The Inquisitors are from a different story. Their story is different than Kenobi's story.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even have anything to do. It just is by accident that... I mean, the Inquisitors are looking for Kenobi, but at the beginning, they're not looking for Kenobi. Kenobi's like always in the background. They're looking for Force sensitives, and for 10 years, they've been hunting down ex-Jedi, and they've been doing well. They've been finding them. But these idiots have never heard of this like underground railroad of people. Like, give me a break.
Yeah. That's an intelligence failure right there. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I'm like, if these Inquisitors don't know that there's an underground Jedi railroad, they're bad at their jobs. I don't like them anymore. You've compromised them. You've made your villains stupid. And then they're fighting amongst themselves. Right. And as soon as Reva, impales the Grand Inquisitor, I'm like, whatever, man. I'm out.
All right. On that note, let's move along to another letter. Okay? We've got a letter now from Chloe Fanning. Something tells me it may not actually be the real Chloe Fanning, but that's okay. We'll see.
Chloe Fanning is a big supporter of the John Campea show and always has interesting things to say. Perfect.
Well, and in fact, Chloe refers to a question that was sent in for the mailbag show at John Campea, but did not get read. So the letter was actually directed to you anyway. It's probably more appropriate we talk about it on Road Trippin'. This is the subject here is Star Trek Generations Apart. So, clearly, Chloe wanted to know, I want to ask a question with a little bit more thought. So here goes. Could the Star Trek of now be made into what Star Trek was back in the day? Seeing how Trek of today now has its own fan base, and with the fans of old Trek still watching the shows, could the Trek of today once again become the Trek of yesterday? Without losing its new fan base, personally, I prefer the old Trek movies over the new ones. I only watch the new Trek movies for what they are, just your basic action sci-fi, where the old movies were where more thought was given. But now it seems as if people just do not want a thought-focused show or movie. But with something such as Star Trek, I would take a thought-driven story any day of the week over just action. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as you might have imagined, you'll get no argument from me. I mean, to me, the thing about action is inherently not interesting because it works on a different. Action's supposed to be a visceral thrill where it's tapping into your own fight or flight reflex. I mean, in a good action scene, you as the viewer are always worried that, because you know what it would like to be in, say, if you're in a war-torn land where you're being strafed by attack helicopters, or you're in a car chase or whatever, an action scene is asking the audience to put themselves in peril along with your main characters.
Right.
So when you're in a great car chase, whether it's in The French Connection or To Live and Die in L.A. or John Frankenheimer's Ronin or a Bourne movie, we all know what it's like to ride in a car. And we all know what it's like sometimes when you drive a little too fast. Well, an action scene works on that level. Mm-hmm. It's tapping into your fear of dying. I mean, that's what a good action scene does. And it makes you, along with the character, you narrowly escape death. So it's visceral and exciting. And a great action scene makes you feel it. Mm-hmm. So, which is great. That's very, very different than something, a movie or a sequence that poses a moral and an ethical conundrum.
Right.
And they work on very different levels. And Star Trek could always have action, but even the action in Star Trek was reinforcing some kind of philosophical or moral or ethical idea or dilemma.
Right.
That if you die, this thing, a civilization is going to collapse. And your own failure in this moment might mean billions of people will sacrifice their lives. So even in a Star Trek movie, the great action has intellectual consequences. And that can be true of an action scene in a movie as well. Like Bruce Willis is trying to rescue all the people in Nakatomi Plaza, so he gets blown up. These people might die too. Like if he doesn't get them off the roof of the Nakatomi Tower, mm-hmm. It's going to blow up. So there is a little bit of that, which adds to an action scene. But the visceral thrills of the action scene usually make you forget there's anything else going on, but not in a Star Trek movie.
Right.
And what's happened is they've turned Star Trek movie, these action scenes in the J.J. Abrams movies, really, other than our characters getting blown up or, at the end, the villain's going to succeed in his nefarious plan or whatever. But the problem is Star Trek movies and Star Trek itself never really had villains. It had antagonists. And not really up until Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which they keep trying to repeat in every Star Trek movie. Wrath of Khan is the movie that no one should be looking to for good Star Trek. It's anomalous. And yet that's all they've ever done. That's all they've ever done. Star Trek II, Star Trek II, Star Trek II. In the new show, Leon, Noonien Singh. They've got a descendant of Khan. Like, fuck off. Fuck you and your Star Trek II obsession.
It's almost like you could say the best thing and the worst thing to ever happen to Star Trek was the success of Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan.
You know what's funny? The people that love Star Trek II and always look to it, they shouldn't be watching Star Trek II. They should read fucking Moby Dick.
Yeah, exactly.
Go read Moby Dick. And if you really want to learn what Star Trek II is about, read Moby Dick. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. That's the problem I have with all modern filmmaking is they look at things that are the riffs, but they don't look at the original that the thing is riffing on.
Right.
They don't, and it's very like if if you're watching Star Trek 2 and you can't tell me who Captain Ahab was, well, then you haven't done your job. And the problem is these writers haven't done their job.
Right.
I bet you everybody that like they read Moby Dick, you know, I mean, it's so funny. At the beginning of Star Trek 2, what does Spock give Kirk for his birthday? A book.
Yep.
A Tale of Two Cities.
Right.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Why do you think Nicholas Meyer picked that book for Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan? Do you think anyone ever thinks to themselves, you know what? I'm writing Star Trek. I think I should read A Tale of Two Cities. I think I need to understand why Spock gave Kirk this book.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? No one ever did. Those idiots that wrote Star Trek Into Darkness, you think they read A Tale of Two Cities? No. What they should have been doing was understanding why Spock gave Kirk that book instead of watching Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan again to write their dumb fucking script. Because that movie is dumb. That might be the dumbest. Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness are two of the dumbest, not just science fiction movies, but dumbest action movies ever written. That's why it's incredibly, I get so frustrated with a lot of the things that I talk about. You know, when I get mad about Star Trek, these are the things that really bother me, that all these people that write modern Star Trek, that use Star Trek 2 as an example, I'll bet you, if I said to them, you know, about these things, these literary allusions that are in the movie, they don't know what those are.
Right.
Like, I'll bet you half the people writing Star Trek, if you just walked up to somebody and you'd say, what book is this from? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Mm-hmm.
That most of the people writing Star Trek could not tell you that was from.
Right. Right.
You know, and there's a lot of literary allusions in Star Trek.
Right.
Especially in the movies. You know, John Masefield, Spock quoting John Masefield. And it's like, and then of course all the Shakespeare references and all that, but it's frustrating that, I mean, Nicholas Meyer is he's a novelist and a playwright and a screenwriter, a filmmaker.
Right.
And, you know, he didn't know Star Trek when he was tapped to make the movie, and he had to rewrite Jack Sauer's script, so like within a week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Roddenberry, he like was told to watch Horatio Hornblower. That's why there's so much nautical imagery in Star Trek 2. You know, even down to the uniforms, they're wearing pea coats. The Mighty Maroons are
That's
pea
right.
coats.
That's right. I was just going to say that. No, you're right. You know, and I guess the other half of Chloe's question here is, with the modern Star Trek, I mean, even if you took the Starfleet, Star Trek stuff out of those shows, would they be good science fiction stories on their own?
So what I was going to say is, I think both Star Wars and Star Trek currently suffer from the same problem. They're only about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're so far up their own asses. I mean, it's like, you know what? Like I said, Leon Noonien Singh is actually a good character, but then they have to give her. She's an ancestor of Khan's. Why? Why does she have to be? And the only reason to do that is so you can bring in a story about Khan, because Khan, if you know your Star Trek history, Khan hasn't been found yet. He's still drifting around in the Botany Bay,
right,
during the time of Strange New Worlds. But the idea that he has a descendant from 300 years ago, much less anybody that would care, like, do you sit there and mull over what your ancestors did 300 years ago? I don't.
No.
And the idea that she would even like that would even be on her mind. I mean, and how many people are named Singh in the world? That's like being named Smith or Jones.
Right.
And yet, same thing's true of Star Wars. Well, let's do a show about Ben Kenobi's survivor's guilt, and I know, let's have him go rescue Princess Leia again. Like, I mean, if somebody brought that up at a writer's meeting that I was running, I would be like, okay, you're fired. Get the hell out of here.
Right.
And no, Disney's like, no, she's our original Disney princess. Let's basically, Kenobi is like a Disney animated movie. We get to see her. She's like a young Mulan.
And now, they've been greenlighted for a second season. Is that right?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't read that unless it happened in the last 24 hours. I don't know. It's a little. I mean, I could. It's just, and now, it's just nobody cares, and it's like you. I think that's why I get so depressed when I watch this stuff, because when I watch a show like From the Earth to the Moon, right? From the Earth to the Moon is a fictitious history of the way things could have been in the what would happen to the world if the Soviets beat us to the moon. Right. And it's this alternate history that jumps ahead. The first season was 70s, the next season's 80s, and now we're in the 90s in the third season. Their opening montage, setting up the last 10 years between the second season and the third season, they had Gary Hart getting elected as president. And what I loved about that was Gary Hart should have been president of the United States. Right. But he couldn't keep his dick in his pants. He was Jessica Hahn?
Yeah.
Was it Jessica Hahn? I mean, he would have been probably a great president.
Or was it Donna Rice? I think it was Donna Rice.
Donna Rice?
Yeah.
Okay, Donna Rice. I thought it was Jessica. Who's Jessica Hahn? I don't know. But yeah, Donna Rice. But in this show, that never happened, and Gary Hart became president. Well, at the time, I knew some people that worked on Gary Hart's campaign, and I was a big fan of Gary Hart. And I think that was 88. Was it 88? And it was Mondale that ended up getting the Democratic nomination. Yes. Mondale was the first president that I voted for. And I love that they did that. And they go through and the very idea that they took Gary Hart and made him a multiple-term president in the show. I mean, it's like that's the kind of thinking that I appreciate. And I think watching like Book of Boba Fett and watching Ben Kenobi, I'm like, look, man, I've read so many of the extended universe books. I've read so many Star Trek comics. There are the stories that you're telling. Like, if I was going to make a Book of Boba Fett movie, why aren't you looking to things like a Michael Mann film, like Thief or Heat, or looking at The Godfather, or looking at any movie where somebody ascends to the throne of something? It's something. Right. And yet, I mean, it was the most rudimentary missed potential. And I feel that Star Trek and Star Wars, they're only, and they think, well, we have to appease the fans. But what they don't realize, fans want a great story. Right. You don't have to put young Princess Leia in a Kenobi series for people to like it. Well, and you've got to give Kenobi a story that's unforgettable. I mean, basically, you know what I would say? This is going to seem weird. Ben Kenobi is like Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption. Okay. So I'm not saying do it as a prison story. But Andy Dufresne is a defeated, guilt-ridden, whatever guy. He just happens to be in prison. Well, Kenobi's in a prison of his own making. Right. So why not look to a movie like The Shawshank Redemption and go do that? That Kenobi makes friends with somebody like Red. And they're in a situation that not in a physical prison, but there's a storyline that has, can you imagine if you were to make a Kenobi show that had the kind of emotional resonance that The Shawshank Redemption has in it? Oh, yeah. So I would tell somebody, fuck Star Wars. Don't tell me about Princess Leia and the Inquisitors and all this fucking bullshit. Tell me a story about Ben Kenobi and his survivor's guilt. And I want you to look at The Shawshank Redemption and come up with a story that's like that, but make it for Ben Kenobi and set it in the Star Wars universe. And you don't get to tell me about Princess Leia or Inquisitors until you've told me what the story for Kenobi is. Right. And then once you've done that, then we'll figure out how to weave Star Wars into it. No, I think I think that makes sense. The and Zihuatanejo and Tatooine actually look quite a bit alike, but there you go. But I mean, the Tatooine is not the place they want to end up at. That's true. Even though that's true. Although
that's an interesting thing. Here's the question it brings up in my mind, though, is are the writers on shows like Star Trek and Star Wars under increased pressure because of the amount of non-canon material that's out there that either extends their universe, or it's the legend, whatever, it's the extended universe or the legend. I can't keep it all straight in Star Wars, but there's all of this stuff that's not canon that they are trying to draw on so that they can draw in, I guess, longtime OG fans of the show. But
no, they just rip this. In Star Trek's case, they just rip it off. No, I mean they literally are just ripping off all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that's problematic because they're ripping it off without understanding what it is they're ripping off. They don't understand the greater ramifications of it all. You know, like they flat out, the Star Trek writers are the most egregious. They're stealing stuff willy-nilly. Here's the problem with them. Mm-hmm. They didn't learn from doing Google searches in high school.
Right.
They don't understand that the teachers can do the same Google search you did. And they don't understand you can steal passages and throw them into Google, and they'll find the quotes of the very things that you stole from.
Right.
And with Star Trek writers, I'm like, well, you stole from that book, and you stole from that book, and you stole from that book. I mean, it's shameless how much shit that they've stolen from other sources. I mean, that show, the people that are writing modern Star Trek are actually corrupt. They're corrupt because they are stealing all of their ideas. Like, you know, there was the case, the tardigrade game case,
right,
where a guy actually sued them. He lost. He was right. He was absolutely right, because in Brian Fuller's original conception of Discovery, the tardigrade character, Ephraim, was a character in engineering. Mm-hmm. And when they needed to change Brian Fuller's original concepts, at least 25% or whatever, call it what you want, somebody went in and just Googled tardigrades. And they're like, how can we keep this character but change it?
Right.
And one of the first things that popped up was Aeneas' game. And they just went in and stole from it. And I say that now. At first, they had no proof. But now, you've got all of these examples where they went in and stole from various Star Trek book writers. And people say, well, Rob, they're owned by Paramount. I'm like, okay, yes. But it's a pattern of you going in and taking things from other authors and not attributing those authors. And you've done it at least 20 times. Mm-hmm. They did it on that tardigrade game. I'll flat out say it. They totally did. And the lawyers came in and no, because all they do is steal ideas. They've taken their main character, Una, number one, Rebecca Romaine, and her whole backstory was taken from
from DC Fontana's,
the Dorothy Fontana. And Pike, knowing about his future, was taken from the Star Trek novel Burning Dreams by Margaret Wanderer Bonanno. I mean, they're just taking all this stuff and incorporating it in without attributing all these things that we already own it. I'm like, you know what? You own the books, but no one made those into movies. I mean, I guess you can take from other authors' works, but you're transforming their work into something else, and you're getting paid for it.
Right. I mean, it is kind of like living in a house made up of pieces of all the other houses in the neighborhood. It's like it doesn't feel very good.
Mike, I have to go. I'm late.
Oh no, and we've got one more letter. I guess we'll have to do this tomorrow, but it's another letter from Omar. So he's a patient man. He will wait for this next letter, I'm sure, for tomorrow. But yes, Rob, thank you very much. And if you get an idea as to what the big musical number is in the upcoming Joker musical, let's debut it. We could do a little song and dance number.
Okay.
All right, man.
Absolutely. Bye, dude.
Take it easy. Great talking to you, Rob. Talk to you later.
I'll see you later. Bye.
Okay, see ya. And that will bring today's podcast to a close. This has been the Road Trippin' with R&B podcast for Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Road Trippin' is a production of Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited and is transmitted throughout the Post-Geek Singularity from our studios in the Arthur Murray Dance Studio in downtown Gotham City. You can find Road Trippin' on your favorite podcasting platform and our website, postgeeksingularity.com. We also post our links to our podcasts on all of our social media accounts. You'll find those. You'll find the PGS on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, Tumblr, and Discord. Don't forget, you can always join our Discord server by clicking on any of the links on our web pages that say discuss this in our online community. You click that link, you go to our Discord server. You don't even have to sign up. You can just participate in the message boards we have there. Of course, we'd like you to sign up. We'd like you to feel like you're part of the community and a fellow imagination connoisseur, because we have hundreds of imagination connoisseurs on that Discord server every day talking about the things you all love. Science fiction, horror, fantasy, genre entertainment, pop culture, comics, model making, all kinds of cool stuff. You'll also find links to some of that cool stuff in our daily newsletter that goes out on an almost daily basis. The Transmissions newsletter is sent out every day of the week, as long as I can get to it. And you can sign up to get it by going to our website, of course, clicking on the links there. Or if you haven't been to our website in a while, when you first hit it, you'll get a pop-up window. You can go ahead and sign up right through that as well. Don't forget, we always like to hear from our listeners and our viewers. That's for any show that we produce on the Post-Geek Singularity. To contact the show, all you have to do on our homepage is click on the button that says send a show a letter, or go to the Contact Us link in the main navigation. Follow the instructions. It's a very simple form. You pick the show you want to contact off a drop-down menu, type in your message, hit return, and faster than Batman can answer the bat phone, Commissioner Gordon, meaning me, will get your email, and I'll send it on to Chief O'Hara, who happens to be Rob's chauffeur in the Robtimus Prime. Well, maybe not. I know Rob drives himself. We're still working on teaching his dogs how to go ahead and drive the car, because what could be more hilarious than a Labradoodle driving a Prius? Think about it. Anyway, that's it. God, it's been a long day today, folks. I apologize. And hopefully tomorrow won't be as long a day, but it'll be just as fun. You'll find out if you tune in. Don't forget, we do these Monday through Friday. This is your host, Mike Bott, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow.